Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I'm actually going to nerd out about micro versus macro debates within business administration. So if you don't know, I'm actually a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and this is my Nerd Out Wednesday series where I talk about things that I find interesting in science. And this is one of the things that we often hear, and this is the debate between micro and macro is across the board in all departments in virtually all parts of a university. But in my field, in business administration, we often have this debate in terms of thinking of, who is the most relevant. Should we focus, should we listen to the psychologists, for example, or people that are doing much more on the organizational behavior, or should we be thinking about organizations in terms of larger entities? Maybe it is sort of the operations of it. Maybe you also think about organizations in terms of markets and where they situate within markets and how they sort of connect each other between different organizations. Maybe that's in finance, for example. You might talk about that kind of stuff. And so there's this constant battle that we often have both within the sort of departments and the sort of larger, broader sciences, but then we also have these battles between you thinking about something in terms of micro and macro sort of levels of analysis within each sort of subfield, right? So in organizational theory, there's lots of people that sort of think about organizations in terms of the micro stuff. So maybe it's the politics, for example, that happen within an organization, how that might affect sort of group behavior, or maybe it might affect maybe perhaps performance of a particular organization, because there's considerable amount of politics that happens at higher levels of an organization. Or maybe we think of maybe some really macro stuff and we start thinking about product differentiation, or thinking in terms of maybe it's an overall generic strategy that you have, which is something like a low cost leadership kind of strategy, right? So there's lots of different sort of debates about whether you should choose a micro or macro view. And depending on which one you look at, you're going to get different answers, right? So you're really, and it really just depends on what your particular interest is whether you're actually doing something on a macro side or a micro side. You're going to see the world in a completely different way. And when you see the world in a completely different way, you will get different results if you analyze the world in that different way. The fascinating thing is that we might actually start making suggestions in terms of how a successful organization is going to be run, depending on the particular field that you're in, right? So if you go talk to a psychologist, if you go talk to, a psychologist, for example, somebody that studies individuals within an organization, well, maybe they are going to have one particular view that is going to suggest that maybe we all have this one type of leadership, or maybe we have this all one type of organization. Maybe you have psychological safety, for example, within the organization. And if you achieve that, then you're going to have a very high functioning organization. You're going to get performance within your organization. You're going to do extremely well. But then you go ask a strategy person. They might say, well, just do this one particular strategy, right? So go do product differentiation, make your product as different and as unique as you possibly can. But then as well, invest in it, invest in the R&D, for example, of developing that product and make sure it's well known and marketed. And then you're going to get performance. Well, the fascinating thing is when you ask these particular fields, or you sort of get answers, when you look at the scientific research in these fields, you're going to get one answer over the other. And it doesn't matter which particular field that you're going to look at. And in fact, when we actually analyze the data and we analyze the sort of phenomenon that we're looking at, that we actually sort of cherry pick and think about the particular phenomenon in terms of the sort of the lens that we're looking at. And that's completely natural, because it actually is really hard to acquire that knowledge to analyze the data in that one particular sort of framework, right? It takes years to understand one particular framework or one particular theory, or one sort of subdomain before you can actually get a very good insight in what's going on. It just turns out that we are probably going to be naturally biased towards the particular answer that you're going to get. And then even within the scientific research, whenever we analyze this and we apply what is called a regression to those particular phenomenons, most of us are not going to control for all these different effects, right? It's virtually impossible to control for all of these effects. And we're going to say that it's just random occurrence that these other things are happening. But as we know in organizations, everything is all connected, right? So if you choose one particular strategy, for example, if you choose a product differentiation strategy, you're probably going to want to make sure that you encourage innovation within the organization, encourage maybe psychological safety, for example. And so they're all highly connected, and yet it's really difficult to sort of control for all these different factors. And it's not necessarily that we are going to control for them. So even when we do these scientific and we get these scientific facts, right? So these results that we actually get, that we often sort of ignore everything else that is going on behind the scenes, and that might not necessarily be the answer going forward. So what I find is interesting is that there is a lot of people out in the wilderness, and it's mostly people that are doing, promoting, maybe there's some sort of guru or something like that, and they're promoting particular ideas where if you choose one particular way of doing something, then you're going to achieve that particular outcome, right? You're going to get success of some sort if you do these kind of patterns. But we've known for years that this is not necessarily the case, and even within our own research, it's really hard to sort of even show or get to that particular conclusion because there is so many things that are going on. And as well, it really largely depends on the sort of way that you look at the particular phenomenon. If you're looking at an organization in terms of a micro lens, and you are sort of a guru that's focused on sort of micro stuff, they're going to say one thing, and if you're thinking about it on a macro side, you're going to say another. So even if we if we try to actually come up with metrics or come up with some sort of way to measure the performance within the organization, right? So we look at the hot thing right now is looking at business analytics, and we come up with one particular metric and how to actually achieve a particular thing, right, within the organization. Well, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of different metrics that we're going to have to look at to actually do a very good job of saying which one that we should choose or which one that we should actually go with. So even though that we have this availability of data right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can actually use that data, because organizations are entirely very complex and we can't necessarily get at that. So my point is, it really just depends on, so the answer to, how do you actually get a successful organization? Well, it really depends on how you're actually looking at the organization, the answer that you're actually going to get. And if you're studying and researching these different organizations, depending on the subfield that you're in, you're going to get different answers, and that's okay. My entire point is that is entirely okay to get these different viewpoints, but we just have to be a little bit accepting in terms of these different viewpoints and realize that our one particular viewpoint is probably not very good, right? So all the knowledge that we understand in strategy in terms of making a successful organization is probably not very good, because we're excluding all these other particular phenomena that are out there. But it is probably the best that we possibly can, given the limitations of human beings in terms of understanding the environment. It is very difficult to take in all this knowledge and all this information and continue to learn and not sort of get overwhelmed with all the knowledge that is available. So we should be very accepting with new ideas and look at other people's perspectives and to come up with better ideas than the ones that we actually have. We might actually have to cross-pollinate these particular micro and macro fields so that we can actually develop things that are interesting. In fact, there is a kind of a push, or a little bit of a push, or a trend that's going on, and sort of bridging these two particular phenomena or things from the micro side and seeing how it actually affects the macro side. Part of that is driven because we have data now that's available that we can actually do some of that stuff, but also there is this push and recognition that it is okay to come up with these different ideas, and it's okay to sort of not very well explain the entire phenomenon of an organization and how success actually becomes, how an organization actually becomes successful. So that's all I wanted to talk about in this particular Nerd Out Wednesday. I just think it's a really interesting phenomenon to think about, the answer you have that you get in terms of understanding your environment. So if you're a researcher or if you're a strategist, if you're watching this as a manager, for example, just take it as a grain of salt on all the stuff that you actually learn along the way or you read along the way, the books that you read and whatnot, that there is a big world out there, and it largely depends, the world, that how you actually look at the world, it depends on the lens that you actually choose to look at the world. That's an important lesson to learn, and I'm going to continue to sort of work on that. We all forget about it, and I'm going to continue to myself develop and think about that going forward. That's all I wanted to say. Take care and have a wonderful day. All right, bye.